Welcome, everyone, to FedEx's journey to the cloud with EPM and analytics. I have a current title, Edward Roske, Argonaut Interroll CEO, but we have joined with us the person who led the entire FedEx journey to the cloud, their entire project, a not only decent human being, despite what his mother says, also a friend of mine. And I'd like to welcome Russ Story. Russ, thank you so much for joining us today. There will be questions that I assume you all have coming up over the course of the next hour. As they occur to you, use the little Q&A section down there at the bottom of the Zoom webinar function. Submit your questions. They will show up on our side. We will ask them. Some of them might be answers. We're probably going to hold a lot of them to the end. But if we don't answer them while we're going on, we will get back to them, time permitting. So my job here today, ask questions, MC, moderate. Russ's job is actually to teach us things. So thank you, Russ, for joining us. So Russ, let's start with, can you give us some background? What drove FedEx's decision to move to the cloud? Why did they say on-prem was not where they wanted to be? They wanted to move up into a cloud world. What really powered that decision?
Sure. Let me give you a little, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, and the reason why I'm here, I spent 20 years at FedEx, all working in FP&A, financial systems. By the way, I want to give a shout out to any of my FedExers that are on the call. I know a few of you, especially some of the, I think some of the ground guys are on. So, hey, shout out Joe, Chris, glad to have you.
We like it. They will keep you honest for the next hour.
Will keep me honest for sure. Keep a close eye on that Q&A if you see anything coming out of Pittsburgh. I also spent a couple of years up at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. But I came back to FedEx in 2017 specifically for this job, which was the cloud migration. And then in May of last year, right before the pandemic really went crazy, I decided to retire. Not necessarily the smartest move ever made. Anyway, stayed retired for about a year. And then in May of this year, I did join Argonaut Interroll as a business advisory solution architect. That tells me they didn't know exactly what to do with me, and they made up some title where they can plug me in wherever they want me to. And I'm happy to do that and happy to be here. As far as the move to Oracle Cloud, again, for those of you that aren't familiar with FedEx, other than maybe seeing the van that drives around through your neighborhood, dropping off packages, hopefully not throwing them, but hopefully leaving them on your porch and your doorstep. FedEx is actually made up of a number of separate operating companies. Express being the big global transportation company. You got FedEx Ground, Freight. Those are the ones, you see those guys on the highway and the airports, all that. With the logistics organization, supply chain, FedEx Office, which is retail, print, and all that. A services company that provides sales, marketing, IT, all the kind of various and sundry things that help support the operating company do their job. Then, of course, there's a corporate structure above all that. The thing that makes it unique when it comes to how we manage financial applications and then therefore the move to the cloud was that each operating company is basically a separate business. Their own operations, their own management, therefore separate financial applications. We all tried to use the same platform. We were all on Hyperion, something other, S-Base, planning, etc., but all with separate applications. I will give credit to the FP&A leadership. I think they saw, some of the things that were happening at Oracle, other probably customers, clients, that the move to the cloud was coming, and maybe we ought to take a look at this. The accounting side of the house had already initiated a huge cloud ERP migration. So it made perfect sense for us to kind of tag along with them. We were like the fly on the back of the elephant as it was headed walking toward the cloud. It's kind of the way I looked at it. It was pretty small compared to the ERP side, but it was great that we were doing it together. So that all made sense. And then at the same time, our on-prem applications were running on some servers that were starting to get a little long in the teeth. And our IT team was pushing pretty hard to, you got to do something with this, replace it or retire it. And they were really in favor of us retiring it. So that was another just kind of line in the sand that said, yeah, it's time to really take a hard look at this and figure out how to do this.
Question came in from the audience. What did you have any concerns? It sounds like you had lots of different operating companies and all of them were an on-prem world moving to the cloud, but obviously with a company in the scale, the size of FedEx, clearly you did it. So whatever concerns there were, you overcame them, but were any people hesitant about making that move?
No, not at all. No, I'm just kidding. We were all
not
pretty
one.
much
It was amazing.
Scared to death. And that's why you'll see here in just a little bit, kind of some of the things that we did, some steps we took to mitigate that as much as possible, to get out in front of it and deal with some of those challenges. Obviously, having multiple operating companies, so you're basically moving multiple businesses kind of simultaneously, which in and of itself is probably not the ideal way, but that was the only way it was going to work for us. And that brought about its own challenges, and on top of just going to the cloud itself, right? Just migrating your applications. So we'll see if we cover some of that probably a little bit as we go through. If there's still something specific someone would like, then fire it up again, and we'll try to answer it then.
So just on that note about taking those different opcos, you made a decision early on as part of the implementation process that you were going to get those FP&A executives from those different opcos and get them together into a financial systems center of excellence, like an FSCOE team.
Right.
Help everybody out there understand what was the purpose of that team, what was the role of it, all the way from the decision making through the implementation. How did it help or hinder keeping all the opcos in sync?
Yeah, I think it helped in many ways. It was something that had already was a little bit in place in an informal manner before this project, where we tried to formalize it a little bit more, which is where we brought in key people from each of the operating companies, the teams that supported all the financial apps. And we got together on a regular basis and said, okay, what's going on? What problems are we having? Sharing information. So what we did for this effort was to more formalize that COE, Center of Excellence. By the way, the accounting side already had a Center of Excellence. And so we looked at kind of how they were doing things and borrowed some thoughts from them when we formulated ours. But it was basically to give us a mandate to go forth and do this, right? So we formed this structure. It's sponsored by corporate. Corporate was writing the checks. So that gave us the mandate, the authority we needed to go out, put together a plan and make this happen. And so the role of the COE was to put the plan together and then communicate throughout to all the operating companies from this core team how we were going to do this and the progress that we made as we went through the migration.
Well, and if I could advocate a bit to learn from FedEx's example, there are a lot of organizations that have different levels of competency, if you will, throughout the organization, whether it's a holding company, an operating company, or just one unified organization, but every department has their own level of competency. Mm-hmm. And what I've discovered is if you take, let's just say it's a bunch of departments, like accounting has some EPM expertise, and finance has some EPM expertise, and IT has some IT expertise, and sales does some as well. If you say on a scale of 1 to 10, each of those is about a 6 in terms of what they know. You take like that example as 4 groups, you bring them together under one center of excellence. You take everybody to a 9 or a 10. They can learn off each other. They can build off each other's examples. You can really start getting experts in different areas, where it's the more distributed it is, the more you kind of have average to above average expertise. You bring it together and you almost have, as I saw developed there at FedEx, almost like a internal consulting group. Like a really top-notch level of expertise. So everybody learn from FedEx's example in that case.
Let me follow up on that. Yeah, we looked at what are the different ways and what are the better ways to form a center of excellence, and how should that operate? The challenges that we had, even though, I think we pulled it off to some extent, is that even though you were part of the center of excellence and you worked in, say, FedEx Freight or FedEx Ground, you were part of this larger center of excellence, you still had your FedEx Ground and FedEx Freight jobs to do, and those had to be your first priority. So that made it in some ways a little more difficult. We were able to do some, common learning, common training, sharing knowledge across opcodes, and so that was one of the benefits of the COE. But sometimes if push came to shove, it's like, sorry, I got to go do my day job first, and so we had to work through that as we did. But I think we did okay.
So it turns out everybody at FedEx wasn't waiting around, waiting for a cloud project to have something to do.
Apparently not.
In terms of concerns, I'm guessing one of them was how do we add another level of project on top of the day jobs? But it sounds like you got everybody on board, or at least willing to live with the decisions. Like, we're going to move forward. We're going to maybe take wait and see, but we're all going to migrate to the cloud. So help everybody out there understand, what was your roadmap? What were the steps that you followed through? Like, where did you begin? What did that path look like?
Right. So, and again, credit back to FP&A leadership. They did do some groundwork before I arrived on the scene, laying some of this out, getting key management levels on board. That this is really what we want to do, and we need to figure out how to do it. And it was their concept to put someone, in this case it ended up being me, to lead this. And so my first job was, okay, how are we going to do this? So I asked myself a number of tough questions. Are we really sure we want to do this? Are we ready to do this? Is everybody really on board? If you got somebody that just didn't speak up, who's really concerned, but they went along with the crowd, how fast? What's our cadence? Are we going to come out of the gate storming, fly up to the cloud, or are we going to crawl the sprint or marathon? So went through a lot of that internal, talked to a lot of people, did a lot of research, and kind of coming out of that, we came up with a 5-point plan. The first point was to build a vision, right? So before you can go anywhere, you got to know where you're going and what it's supposed to look like when you get there, or else you don't know that you're there. So we tried to do that, build that vision, define that future state, identify the goals that we're trying to accomplish on the way, clearly identify who's involved in this, right? Who are the participants, who are going to help us get to where we need to go, and hopefully communicate this vision in a way that generates interest, excitement, a little momentum, get some people like, yeah, this is really cool, this is what we need to do, get them on board, and help drive this thing forward. So that was the first step of the plan that we came up with. The second point, which I called phone a friend, is this is where NRL came in and helped us out. Is you gotta have somebody to help you do this, right? So while internally you can manage your applications, you can probably build new applications. Something as major and drastic as going from on-prem to the cloud, we had to get someone to help us, right? So what I call a trusted partner, we had to find one. And so we established a process for figuring out who that was going to be. So we made a list of candidates, some criteria. We knew who a lot of the key players are in the business. So we talked to them, talked to their leadership, talked to customers, narrowed the field down, and then picked who we thought was the best fit for us. It would get us the roadmap that we needed. And fortunately, we selected NRL to do that for us. Some of that came from, we've been attending conferences for years. You guys, the NRL team is always strong there. Great presentations. You can just see the expertise. Most of the presenters are charismatic, not all of them, but most of them are.
I'm feeling really personally attacked right now with that comment. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So we felt pretty comfortable with them that these guys knew what they were talking about, and that they would be a good team to work with. So we picked NRL to help us build the roadmap. This is not the actual doing the migration. This is to help us build a roadmap. How are we going to get this done right now? How long is it going to take? What order? All that. We need somebody to help us figure that out. The actual development of an RFP and the selection of an actual migration partner that came later. But that all came out of picking NRL as the partner to help us build the roadmap. The third point was what I called due diligence. When I presented this the first time at a recent collaborate, I said, the reason I put this in there, I just wanted to be able to say doo-doo on the stage while I was standing on the stage. I thought that got a couple of laughs, not about as many as I'm getting now, I think.
I'm laughing. They're laughing on the inside, but
thank you, Edward, for laughing at that. Anyway, basically what that means is before you go charging down this path, talk to everybody. Take the time, talk to all the teams, your users, power users, admins, experts, leadership, everything. Talk to everybody. Find out what everybody thinks. Find out what their concerns are. Evaluate their level of comfort, expertise, just all that information, pull it all together, and figure out where some of the issues are right out of the gate. And then what I said, you got to be brutally honest on some of those, because you don't have a lot of time to mess around. So just figure the stuff out, rely on that partner that you picked to help you work those issues. And then finally, it's hard to do, but the quote I like to say is maintain an even strain. If anybody's a fan of the movie The Right Stuff, like I am with the original Mercury astronauts, that was something they always did. You never saw them get really upset, really down, really high. It was just maintain that even strain. But what you want to do throughout this, especially while you're building it, try to keep a level head. Otherwise, you'll get swung in so many different directions. You won't be able to handle it. Step 4, what I call take the road well traveled. You've heard I think it's the poem, take the road less traveled. In this case, you don't really need to be blazing a new trail if the trail is already right there in front of you. So you want to learn from those that have been there before, and that's where your partner can help you. Unless this is the first cloud migration that your partner has also done, then they should be a wealth of knowledge and information that you can rely on as you go along your cloud migration path. So rely on them to help you figure out not necessarily the path of least resistance, but the proper path. But you don't always have to be, get your machete out and start carving through the jungle unless you have to, right? So make sure that you look at all that information, rely on your partner, and make the right decision, and that you're taking the most efficient path to where you want to go. And then finally, the fifth was enjoy the ride, but monitor the course. So there's going to be bumps, there's going to be curves. In all the years that I've been working, there's never been a project that goes perfectly, exactly like you planned, perfectly on schedule, all that. So, but don't be afraid of that. They're going to come. Just they'll help you appreciate when things are running a little smoother, right? So just know that they're going to be there. Be ready to tackle them. And if you've done a good job, what I said, if you did a good job on steps 1 through 4, 5 won't be as bad. Hopefully, you'll be doing more, enjoying the ride. But while you're enjoying the ride, keep tabs on how things are going. I think in one of the original presentations, I had a picture of a T-Rex in your rearview mirror. So you never know there's something lurking out there. So you can't let your guard down. Just stay on top of the project as you're going through it. So that was the 5-point plan that we kind of put together to help us build this whole conglomeration of what it's going to take to get all the FedEx finance teams to the cloud.
Well, and to your point, it's fun to go on a Jeep through the woods. You know, the bumps make it kind of interesting. Getting to go different areas. Maybe not a T-Rex behind you, although that Jurassic ride at Universal is kind of fun.
Sure.
Nobody wants a Jeep on completely flat pavement everywhere, but yes, monitor. Make sure you're not lost. Make sure you haven't wandered into a theme park somewhere. So there were a lot of opcos that had to get migrated. So help everyone out there understand what was that cadence for that platform migration just across the various opcos. Was it okay? We're going to start on Tuesday and everyone converts on Friday, you know, or is it broken out, split apart? And just while we're on that note, because you alluded to, you know, there were bumps, you know, that occurred. Can you just talk us through some of those surprises or key findings that you discovered that impacted that original roadmap as you started to actually do that platform migration across the opcos?
Right, sure. So the original roadmap, I don't know if we have a picture of that or not. Anyway, this was the culmination of a multi-week activity where the NRL team came on site and talked with every operating company team and learned about their current applications, their level of skill and expertise. Just, you know, gathered all that information, did a great job, and then went away. It wasn't what, you know, we in the business known as a strategic. It wasn't a strategic assessment. We had a kind of a specific activity. This is what we're doing. We're going to the cloud with that space and planning, right? Help us figure out how to get there with this thing called FedEx. And so we captured all the information. You guys came back with the year one roadmap. Here's which opco is going to go first, and here's what they're going to do. And then you had all the logic behind that. You know, so why is FedEx Ground going first, or why is FedEx Express going last? And so there were a lot of factors that went into that. You know, some of the opco support teams are very strong. Ground, Express, Freight services had really teams that had been established, knew their stuff. So one of the things we wanted to try to do is make sure the first opco out the gate was going to be successful, right? So we wanted to pick a team that we knew would probably have a pretty good chance of pulling it off. So that was all factored into the roadmap. Also, you know, there's always scheduling concern. Every opco has big projects, big things that are going on. Of course, we're all in finance, so every year there's a budget cycle. When it's time for budget, it's like finance shuts down for 4, 5, 6 months while they're doing the budget. So we had to work around that. So we would do like S-based migration when it was planning time. When you're not doing the planning, well, then you can do the planning. So all that factored into the roadmap that we put together the first year. And I think for the most part, we took the map as NRL recommended. We might have made a couple of tweaks, but we did that collaboratively, excuse me, between COE and NRL team on figuring out the best way to make that happen. Once we got started, and some of the initial, I'll call them surprises, there were definitely surprises to me, even though I think a couple of them I probably should have anticipated. Things like connectivity, right? So if you're a big company like FedEx, you have a firewall, really major firewall, because people are pounding on your network constantly, right? And if you're a vendor, you got to go through VPN, you know. So all those connectivity challenges just take a little bit longer to get resolved than you expect. Those were real challenges. And part of it's just, I think, the way FedEx managed it. you can only make changes like once a week. So if you missed your window or you did something wrong, well, you just lost another week before you get fixed. So we had to work through some of that. One of the others was, okay, so we're going to the cloud, so we're going to retire all this old servers and on-prem infrastructure. Well, we actually had to have some new infrastructure too, because at the time, the best data integration tool was financial data management, FDME. So that means we had to get servers to run FDME on. Plus, we needed something to support automation and external storage. So we did have to stand up some new servers. And anybody that has a big IT organization, I love my brethren in IT, but they don't move very fast, right? So you got to get out in front of that. So that was a little bit more of a challenge. And then when it came time for rubber to hit the road, you got a strong team over here that manages and supports their on-prem applications. It's still pretty good, but it's not an exact fit going from on-prem to cloud, right? So the skill set is similar, but it's not exact. So just have to take that a little bit more into account, that maybe we didn't in some cases, where the skill set was very specific in, say, an on-prem tool, and either that on-prem tool wasn't available or didn't work the same way in the cloud. So there was some new training and learning that had to happen that we didn't see coming a little bit as much. And then lastly,
just pausing on that one before you get to your last point, help everyone out there understand just how transferable was that knowledge. So when they went from, obviously you do things very differently in an on-prem world and the cloud world, but there is some level of overlap. Is that 10% of it was relevant, like they understand dimensionality, but that's it? Or is it more like 90% because it has that Hyperion DNA? Like how much of it needed to be completely relearned? How much of it was transferable? Or did it differ by OpCo admin team?
It did differ by OpCo, and I'll use my FedEx ground brothers as an example. They had a lot of their data integration was using ODI. Well, they were going to have to figure out how to do that in something else, right? FDME was their main data integration tool, and it wasn't so much necessarily the skills of the team. It was going to a completely new tool and having to basically reinvent the wheel right over there. So that was just one example of where a little bit of skill set, as well as this tool doesn't exist over here in the cloud, at least it didn't at the time. So we got to re-engineer this whole thing over there. We did not anticipate that in the initial, I think, assessment. I think on the others, especially on planning side, I think the planning and the S-Base, just the applications, the skill set went pretty smooth, I thought. I think maybe a little more on the back end, some of the interfaces, the integration was probably where we were challenged more than on the application side. Okay,
so that's a good point to realize. So the administration team, obviously, you had a well-seasoned, I mean that politely, a well-seasoned administration team. To be clear, Russ and I did not start this project with gray in our beard, but we both now have it. You had an admin team that had been around for a long time, understanding, supporting all this. From the user side, they had been using various front ends, SmartView and planning and other tools. Would you say that their experience directly applied to the user side versus kind of the admin infrastructure, integration that changed a lot more?
Yeah, I think it was much less of an impact on the user side. FedEx is a huge SmartView shop, so it was more. Yeah, we had to make some tweaks to a lot of SmartView templates because it wasn't exactly the same when you were connecting to S-Base and OAC. I think there was a few little changes that didn't make some users happy because they had a whole bunch of templates and they had to go in and touch them all. But other than that, the mechanics of how to pull data in, how to pivot and do all that stuff, that translated well, and so they didn't really have to change. It was just where did they get their data? And they point to a planning app, or did they point to an S-based app that's now in the cloud, as opposed to being on-prem? So that wasn't near as bad as it was on the admin side.
Great. And I think you were about to tell us point 4.
But there's one more, yeah. And keep in mind, I'm learning all this too. I didn't know any of this stuff when I walked up in the door to do this. So I'm getting a crash course in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, all the different as a service Oracle stuff that was going on. The one thing in our favor was that, at least at that time, Oracle was still doing the Oracle managed OAC. So we didn't have to really learn any of the cloud infrastructure stuff. Oracle managed all that for us. We just, hey, I need a new S-based instance, boom, pop it up, and off we go. But the challenge came on the security side, setting up users in groups, right? So it's different between SaaS and PaaS. SaaS, they have their own security built in. We did have to get into some infrastructure on the PaaS side, simply because it's a platform. So I had a lot to learn there to set up all the groups. On the EPM side, it's different, but we were able to get through that. But to have to manage 2 different ways of doing it was a real challenge, and a little bit more. And then to make it even more complicated, right toward the end of at least the 3rd year while I was there, FedEx decided to change from ping to Okta for, so all the internal stuff completely changed, and we had to go back and accommodate and adjust a lot of the security that we'd already put in place to work with the new security tools. In the long run, it was the right move. I'm glad FedEx did that, but it was just more work for us.
Well, and you brought it up a couple of times. Obviously, security, hugely important, because you've got a company, not only the size of FedEx, but the scale, right? The global reach. And, it's one of those things that, hackers and, wouldn't really enjoy, attacking FedEx. Back, 4 or 5 years ago, when you were beginning to ponder this journey, it's interesting that security was a bigger concern for a lot of companies, frankly, than it is now. And that might be like, wait a second, are the hackers getting worse? That's not what I mean. But like 5 years ago, there was a belief in a lot of organizations that they were better at running data centers than Oracle or Google or Microsoft or whatever. And that pendulum has kind of really gone the other way with a lot of cloud providers. Like, yeah, they're probably better at running a data center than we actually are. But from FedEx's standpoint, looking back, are you comfortable with the level of security and support you got? Do you feel it was like the right decision moving forward? I know there were the connectivity challenges going on-prem to the cloud, but do you feel safe and secure in that cloud world?
I did. And in fact, I was really surprised and happy to hear when FedEx kind of as a whole embraced the cloud. Because I remember early on, back a number of years ago, I have no idea how many, FedEx has data centers all over the place, and who knows how much data they have. And they're like, we will never put any FedEx data in a cloud because it's too precious. And I think that's all completely changed now. That doesn't mean we're completely out of managing some of our own internal warehouses and data, but I think that overall kind of mindset of not using cloud for data storage has definitely shifted, and I think for the better. If you don't have to go to the expense and trouble to maintain those data centers, as long as the providers can do it at a reasonable cost and securely, why not? That's my personal opinion there. Not speaking for FedEx in this case or anyone else.
No, absolutely. Yeah. If you can if you can make your security problem someone else's security problem, it's a much better situation. So help us understand. I was being a little bit tongue in cheek earlier when I said we all decided to do this on a Tuesday and every company moved simultaneously. And you correctly said, like, yeah, that would have been chaos, like worldwide. There's an order that makes sense based on priorities, based on internal size, internal desire, burning fires, desire for functionality. Some obviously had much greater pressing needs than others. Help us understand where, it's best of your awareness, where is FedEx currently in that cloud migration journey?
Right. So when we first started, or at least when I first started, I kind of envisioned this being a 3-year project. And we were in the middle of year 3. So if you think back, I mentioned the roadmap. The first roadmap that NRL built for us was for year 1. So here's the 7 companies, and here's what they're going to do in year 1, whether it's migrate S-Base or planning or the reporting or whatever it was. So that was year 1. So we're thinking about what's coming later, but as we got about halfway through year 1, that's when we start planning year 2. So we were near the end of the 3rd year of the cloud migration when I decided to pull the pin, to use I watch a lot of Bosch police, pull the pin and go ahead and retire. And I think we were probably coming up just a little bit short of having everything migrated to the extent that we wanted at the end of year 3. It spilled over. They did do a year 4 after I left, and I think there's still probably a few things hanging out there. But in general, once the baseline S-Base applications, the baseline planning, the baseline reporting was all migrated to the cloud, corporate said, okay, opcos, we're pushing you out of the nest now, and you're free to go off and manage yourselves now. And I think, for the most part, I think that's where they are. The different operating companies are continuing to invest in where they think it's most appropriate, whether they're adding more capability to their planning apps, building new S-Base cubes, upgrading to, obviously Oracle, just like everybody else. I'm a huge golfer. Every year there's a new golf club that comes out, and you got to have it, right? Oracle comes out with, they either change something or come up with something new that's so good you want to go get it, right? And that all drives change. So at this point, it's kind of up to each operating company to decide where do they want to invest. Are they comfortable with where they are, or maybe their hands being forced a little bit by Oracle or something else to make some changes. So obviously, I don't have quite the visibility to that as I did, but that's kind of where we left off and where we were thinking things would transpire down the road.
Well, on that note, we have another question coming in from the Q&A. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them across. The question was, just talk through, if any pushback you got from those various opcos where you needed to just talk that organization into, or concerns they specifically had that you had to address. So you talked about a little bit earlier about people had concerns, but were there any specific opcos that had pushback? You don't have to call them out by name. You can just say, Opco X. Yeah.
yeah, Opco X, Y, and Z. No. In general, I think everybody was very interested. Now, when it came time to commit people, resources, et cetera, to it, we did have a couple of opcos that balked a little bit. And part of it was, in some cases, they're on-prem applications, whether it was planning, probably more planning than S-Base. I think S-Base was pretty well utilized and done very well throughout all of FedEx. So that migration was not a whole lot of pushback there. But on the planning side, if you really weren't using planning, for planning, some opcos, maybe it was more of a data holder. You did a lot of planning external, and then you just loaded data into planning and then used it for certain things. Then you couldn't see the value in lifting this thing and rebuilding it over here in the cloud when you aren't really using planning for what it was designed to do in the first place, right? So, we got, I don't know if we call it pushback there. It was kind of like, we're just not ready to do that.
Mhm.
That would mean they would actually have to invest in building a true planning application. And I understand some of them, we're just not ready to do that yet. So, and from my perspective, I'm like, well, yeah, we're not going to pay to move a planning application to the cloud if you're not going to use it, and it doesn't really make sense for us to move it right in the first place. So that was more what happened, not any real significant, no, we don't want to go to the cloud, or we're too afraid to go to the cloud. It helps when you're the ones writing the checks too, that they get on board when you're funding it for them. I'd say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm sure that was true to some extent. But all the teams that I worked with were great, and they were on board and working hard to get it done.
There's a question that's given. This is kind of a technical one, but it's relevant. So a company the size scope of FedEx, there's the assumption you probably didn't have one single centralized ERP that everybody was in that one instance. Just give an idea, what ERPs did you have? Was it all, okay, we're on whatever, Oracle EBS or Fusion, or did you have some SAP out there, or PeopleSoft, Workday, JD Edwards? What does your ERP side look like?
Sure, I'll start by the caveat that I'm not an accounting person, never will be, never want to be, but not to disparage our brethren over in accounting. At the time we started this, FedEx was a PeopleSoft shop. And my understanding is that they had gone through a fair amount of consolidation to try to get everybody on a single PeopleSoft instance. I think at one point, Express, which is the big, we call them the mothership. They're like the big original. They're huge. We're on a separate instance. I can't remember whether they got them all on one at the time. But as part of the migration, they were moving everybody to cloud. Now they had at least a three to 5 year plan, I think, to make that happen. But they're talking global now, right? So you got all that going on. It's a much bigger project, and I kudos to that. Chris Wood was the VP over there, and his team did an amazing job. I'm not sure where they are with that. They ought to be probably getting close to having that finished. But it was pretty much PeopleSoft shop before they went to cloud ERP.
Great. From a evaluation standpoint, that's another question that came in from online. How extensive did you look at maybe switching your tool set? Going away from Parent World, going to something else that was out there before you made that decision. The more direct translation is to Oracle EPM. Like how much looking elsewhere did you do, and then why did you make the decision to stick in the Oracle EPM world?
We didn't give a whole lot of thought to anyone else. We were pretty invested in Oracle, and we made that call a long time ago. And while there's a lot of new products out there that offer, especially if you're wanting pretty pictures and doing a lot of that they can offer maybe an alternative to that. But from a pure, if you're looking at analytics side, what Essbase does, and then especially the way Oracle was making movement, how they're pushing Essbase into all their EPM products, I thought that was a huge plus, putting Essbase at the bottom of planning, and then ultimately it's made it over into FCC. That's great. Utilize this data engine. So we were pretty much, maybe on a when things were going really bad, one of these other names would pop up, and we would just chit chat about it. Well, we should have gone with X. We knew we were going Oracle from day one, and I don't think, at least this is my personal opinion, making a product technology switch we probably have never gotten off the ground. That would have been even bigger project, and not one I would necessarily would have been willing to sign up for myself.
Yeah, before this is over, I want to share with everyone the call that you made to me after we were officially awarded and signed on to do this project. But I'll get to that in a second. But last takeaway question before I tell that little bit of a story. So given like this was such a massive scale, robust project affecting hundreds, thousands of users, share with everybody, what were your key takeaways? What were those like little knowledge nuggets, trademark pending, knowledge nuggets that you could share with the other companies, the ones that are ready to migrate to the cloud?
Sure. Yeah, we learned a lot. You know, if you're an NFL fan, they have a show called Hard Knocks, which talks about training camp for NFL football team. We went through like a 3-year Hard Knocks program on migration to the cloud, but you do learn a lot, and you remember stuff too sometimes when you learn it in a difficult manner. But some of the things we learned, and at the top of my list, is it goes back to picking that partner. You got to have a partner you trust. It has to be someone, you know, I give tons of credit to Melissa, who was our NRL project manager. I'm sure there were days she got up and said, I don't really want to talk to Russ today, but I have to. But
I will neither confirm nor deny that she texted me that at any point.
I'm sure, and I don't feel great about that, but we worked through all of these challenges, and the NRL team, we had a couple of really big challenges, especially some on the infrastructure side, and but you guys hung in there and did what you needed to do, and we got it worked out. So you got to have somebody that you can trust, that you can work through the challenges with, and hopefully also have some fun with. I don't want this to sound like it was a 3-year grind, because we did have fun too, and hopefully the other groups at FedEx feel the same way, even though they felt probably a little more of the stress at times than I did, because they were the ones actually trying to make it happen. Some other things, you know, usually, or in many cases, your timetable may be dictated to you. If it's not, then once you come up with your timetable, add to it. I'd say 25 to 50%. And that's just some of those things that you know are going to come up. You don't know what they are, and you don't know exactly what it's going to take to resolve them, but they always appear. So try to have a little bit, I don't want to say fluff, but just you know, some flexibility in there. And that's just, you know, the whole flexibility aspect. No project ever goes as planned, so we'll try to be flexible. Try to get those people that are your power users, that like technology, that like to do this kind of stuff. Try to get them on board early, get them out there talking it up, talking how great it is. If you've got new infrastructure, like I mentioned, we love our IT folks, but they are somewhat bureaucratic, and for good reason. But so you got to give them plenty of time to get all their stuff done if you've got to have new infrastructure. So be aware of that and blaze that trail, get in front of that as early as you can. And then one thing that became obvious to us as we were coming down the end of each of the phases when we were getting ready to roll something out is that, you know, you typically your back end load your end user training. So you got to build, migrate, whatever you're doing with your application. You can't train them till it's done. Well, if you run into problems, then that's the part that gets squeezed, right? So, but you can't shortchange that. You got to give sufficient time for that end user training and invest on your admins, but do that earlier in the process, right? So they get the information they need to help with the development of the migration. Don't train them just at the end, right? You wanted to go through this together. We never wanted it to be, okay, NRL, go move us to the cloud, right? We're going together. So it's a joint effort. We're learning from each other. you're learning how FedEx does it, and we're learning how we're supposed to do it in certain ways. And so
trying to meet in the middle.
Exactly.
This is external best practice. This is FedEx's way of doing it. Yeah.
And then, so just make sure you allow sufficient time for all that training to get done on both the admin and the end user side.
And I don't know if this is the right point to wax poetic about change management, but definitely throughout the entire project, this is, I will tell you that, lessons learned in the industry as a whole, not just at FedEx, is, Russ was talking about, you always make sure you have time at the end, like to do that training, but early and often. The more you can stay people connected, the more you can have them evangelize, so much the better. It's funny, is the very first bullet up there is pick a cloud migration partner that you trust. And Russ, I don't know if you remember what you said to me. So Russ called me right after we awarded the project, the contracts were signed, and Russ said, Edward, this is a really important project. There's nobody else that I feel could do this and could make sure it's a success other than you, and I completely trust you. But I want to let you know, I want to retire on a high note. And if I don't, I'm holding you personally responsible for it. So it's like all the trust but verify sort of things. So yeah, I was intimately involved throughout the entire project. It's like, how is it going? I don't want Russ to kill me. It's like I can just picture Russ in retirement going, that golf ball was Edward's head, and just whacking at it.
Somebody told on me.
Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered all the points we wanted to cover.
Just trying to think, did we promise anyone anything? Special guests, perhaps?
Oh, look who just walked in. We do have a special guest. Hey, let me take this opportunity to introduce our special guest today. Those of you who don't know, that mystic from the Southwest who can metaphysically divine answers to never before seen questions. Could be EPM or could be anything else, we don't know. That great seer, soothsayer, sage, and former spiritual and couch script advisor to Glenn Schwartzberg, it's Edward the Magnificent.
Well, thank you. Of all the introductions I have ever received, that is by far the most recent.
Oh, great seer, sayer. Happy to have you here. I have in my hand envelopes. A child of 4 can plainly see these envelopes have been hermetically sealed. All right. They've been kept in a mayonnaise jar on Larry Ellison's porch since noon today. No one knows the contents of these envelopes, but you, in your mystical and borderline divine way, will ascertain the answers, having never before heard the questions. I hand you the envelope.
Thank you. I don't know if we have any time left after that introduction, but thank you, Russ, on behalf of EdNAC the Magnificent. Speaking on behalf of everyone else around the world, we really appreciate your handing envelopes over. So I will now try and ascertain, as Russ said, without having never before heard the questions, what the answers are. I must have complete silence. This is really easy to have. Well, we were going for complete silence, and then Russ ruined it. You're the only one who's off on mics. Complete silence. The vast emptiness of space.
The vast emptiness of space.
There's an echo. The vast emptiness of space. What is hidden beneath Edward Roske's hat?
Who wrote these?
No one. I'm not sure what. That's definitely the answer. Second envelope. The Delta variant.
Okay.
You are supposed to repeat it. The Delta variant.
Delta variant.
Yes, well done. We practiced this. What is the new nickname for Spirit Airlines? The Delta variant. So, yeah, it's a tough Zoom. Why did the chicken cross the road?
I have no idea. Oh, why did the chicken cross the road?
No, it's just a fun question to ask. It actually has nothing to do with the envelope. Okay, actually envelope. S-Base and Glenn Schwartzberg.
Space and Glenn Schwartzberg.
Name two things that are square and hard to understand. Couple more laughs for that one.
Oh, good. Glenn's getting his shots today.
Yeah, glad he showed up. Don't worry, the pain will end soon. A dog in a tutu.
A dog in a tutu.
Dog in a tutu. What will be the top outfit at next year's Met Gala? Kind of topical.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Do due diligence.
Heard that before. Do diligence.
Yeah. Rather topical. We just covered that one.
Yeah, exactly. You should already know the answer to it.
What will you find in the woods near a wild diligence?
Man, could have used that one earlier.
Yeah. Don't write them. I just read them. Okay. Don't worry. There are only 2 envelopes left. Cosmopolitan.
Cosmopolitan.
Cosmopolitan. I can tell they're laughing on the other side there. Cosmopolitan. What did the Inspiration 4 passengers toast with when they landed back on Earth? I get it. Cosmopolitan. I hold in my hands the last envelope.
Just in time.
Well, we still have participants. Yes. We'll get to this one quickly.
They are dwindling.
Yeah. Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Awesome. How do you catch a fleeing Ted? Everyone, thank you for tuning in today. Edward the Magnificent. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see all of you at our Hyperion Solutions Conference. We are getting the band back together again. It's like a journey. Just every 5 years or so, we bring everybody back together. So we'll be hosting our next Hyperion Solutions Conference on November 2nd and 3rd. Might be keynoted by Edward the Magnificent. You never know. I kind of like doing this and just having stuff like dingle around. If you want to join, please go to interrel.com right now. Sign up. It is totally free. On behalf of Russ and I, may the sands of the Kalahari never clog your vital openings. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.